Yeah, I say all the time, decision makers don't meet with sales reps because they don't have any information or understanding of how to solve their problem. They're just repping a product. Now, they will meet with a sales rep who actually doesn't act like a sales rep. They'll meet with somebody. In other words, if you act like a sales rep, and I define a sales rep as somebody that's saying, I got this product and I know how to sell it, versus a trusted partner or consultant, however you want to, whatever label you want to give it. If you know something about how to solve their problem that they don't know, they will talk to you.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Sales Enablement Podcast. I'm your host, Andy Paul. That was Tom Stanfill. Tom is the co-founder and CEO of Aslan Training and is the author of an interesting book titled Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Lead, and Influence. And our conversation today, we're digging into a new concept that Tom writes about in his book. He calls it receptivity. Because Tom believes that when buyers say no to a meeting, they aren't rejecting a product or service, they're rejecting the sales call. In other words, they're unreceptive to being influenced by a seller. So a customer's willingness to listen is more important than your ability to communicate. So we dig into what sellers have to do to convert the unreceptive, which is hard to do is because the only guidance sellers have been offered for years is along the lines of, hey, let's work harder and send more messages and make more calls, with the typical result that they face increased resistance or a lack of receptivity from the buyer. So what can you do to change all this? Well, that's what we're going to get into today, a conversation with Tom. So we get into all that and much, much more. But before we get to Tom, I want to remind you to subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. All right, let's jump into it. Tom, welcome to the show.
Andy, thanks for having me on. I've been a fan for quite a while, and I am loving your new book. So I know I would say that anyway, Andy, but I actually mean it.
Right. Yes, it's really nice when people mean it.
Yeah, in this case, I actually mean it. I have to say it on most of the podcasts I'm on when there's an author, but I actually mean it this time.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
It's great to see somebody who shares my
I've had authors
passion
on this show. Yeah, well, I mean, we're going to talk about it because you and I are very well aligned. Yeah. But I have had authors on the show where we haven't seen eye to eye. But yeah, not too frequently.
Yeah.
So
we really appreciate it. Yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to dive in and talk about somebody who's got a lot of experience, sees the world the way that I do, and is passionate about what I'm passionate about. So I'm sure I'm going to learn a lot, and hopefully it'll be helpful for your listeners.
Well, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be because we're going to talk about your book, Unreceptive, A Better Way to Sell, Lead, and Influence. And as you and I were sort of chatting before we started recording, is one of the things I really liked about it is, you and I shared this idea. It's like, there's really nothing new in sales, right? I mean, anytime somebody says, oh, I've got 5 secrets about, it's like, come on. There's no secrets. Everything's been written about for forever. But what we do need is new perspectives, right? New ways to look at what we're doing to help us do it differently and better. And you've introduced this concept of receptivity, which we're going to get into, which I just think, that's the type of thing we need is just another perspective.
Yeah, I think it's a very tangible way to get your handle on the problem that sellers are facing today. Really, a lot of us are facing almost in every part of our lives where we want to influence, is that every time we enter into a conversation, whether it's a teenager, a spouse, a team member, a customer, a prospect, they are either in one of two zones. They're either emotionally open, they're sitting there saying, hey, I'd like to know what your position is, or I'm open to hearing your perspective, or they're emotionally closed. And it could be the subject's closed, or it could be the door's closed. And now, more than ever, the door and subject is closed. And so that's a simple way to get a handle on, okay, am I, the first question I need to ask myself if I want to influence, which I love your passion for not persuasion, but influence. If I want to influence, the first thing I need to do is ask myself that question because it changes my strategy, right? When they're closed, they're emotionally closed, the message doesn't matter. My value prop doesn't matter. My message doesn't matter. we have to first get that door open, or we got to get that subject. We got to make sure that, as I talk about in the book, the soil has to be fertile before I even plant the seed. And in sales, we love to talk about the seed, the message. But until the soil is fertile, until the person I'm talking to says, what do you think I should do? What's your perspective? Tell me what you're experienced, and they're open until my daughter says, who do you think I should date? Or what do you think about?
Well, I love that story in the book. It's like, you were just saying, I'm not judging who you're dating, right?
Yeah.
It's just,
I got it. Yeah. So that's a completely different mindset and skill set.
Right. Yeah. Not putting someone in a position where they will put up the walls.
Yes.
And say, I don't want to engage this way. Now, have you read Jonah Berger's book, The Catalyst?
No.
Okay. You'd really like
The
it.
The Catalyst?
I think it's The Catalyst.
Okay.
And he was on the show a couple years ago. So the book's a couple years old, but it's about persuasion and influence. Even though he and I got into a little bit about perhaps the differences.
Right.
But he cites in the book, he said, hey, there's a universal research shows that 100% of people in the world have this persuasion reactance. You use the word reactance. He uses it as well, but a resistance to being persuaded.
Yeah.
100%. This is not, some people don't like it. Everybody doesn't like it. And yet I find it ironic that is at the heart of the way that we try to enable salespeople is, we got to teach you how to be more persuasive.
Yeah, and I think that truth comes from this idea that when people feel like they're being persuaded, it's someone who's trying to control or change them or convince them to do something, which means they're wrong.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, that's exactly right. And I talk about that in the book as well. As this whole idea about persuasion is it's a zero-sum game. If I'm persuading you, I'm right.
And you're wrong. And people don't want to.
Yes.
My wife doesn't want me to enter into the room and go, let me tell you why you're wrong.
Yes.
I need to get you to change.
Mine doesn't either.
By the way, I talk about family a lot because those are the people that know me the best and those are the hardest people to influence. And also we care more about them than anybody else, I think. At least I should say.
But what you're talking about in the book, I'm sorry. What I'm saying is what you're talking about in the book, though, is what I tried to do as well is that, this is universal, right? It works in sales, but it works in life.
Yes.
Right. And so maybe it'd be better for sellers. We said, look, this is just how to be a better human.
Yeah, it's better. Yeah.
And if you're a better human, then you're better with your prospects. And I have something similar. I talk about your job as a seller is not to persuade. Your job is to listen, to understand what's most important to the most important thing to the person you're talking to, and then help them get that.
Perfect.
And I said, what if you applied that to a partnership at work? What if you applied that to your spouse, your partner, whomever at home? You're going to do the same thing, right?
Exactly right. Yeah. And I think that our challenge is ultimately sometimes our motive.
Well, yes.
We have something, especially in sales, that gets a little complicated if we talk about all our relationships, right? But especially in sales, we have a motive. We have an agenda. We want to be successful. We have a quota. We have our goals. And I think, what I try to teach and tell myself is that I am going to be more successful and more fulfilled if I set my agenda aside, right, and help people achieve their agenda. And I think you mentioned that in the book, your quote by Zig Ziglar, I love.
Zig Ziglar,
right. Which is just you're going to get what you want if you help other people get what they want. It's fundamental, but you got to believe it. And here's why I think people set that aside, because it sounds a little, that's a little, as somebody said on the call to me the other day, that's a little woo-woo. Right. And it is a little woo-woo if it's just woo-woo. But the reality is your motive is transparent. If you thought... Yes. If you knew that when you're talking to someone, there was a little bubble above your head and your motive was being broadcast up there and everybody could see it, it would become all of a sudden really important. And the fact is, that's the truth. You have 43 muscles in your face. And when you are trying to manipulate somebody or you're not listening, or you care about yourself, or you're tuning out, or you're selfish, your motive is transparent. And so when you really make that decision say, my goal and focus is to help you achieve what you want to achieve. Now, that doesn't mean they have the right path to get there. You most likely need to influence and change their way of thinking about getting there, but their ultimate destination is theirs. And it's not about you, it's about them. And if you make them the hero of the story, which is a real popular thing to talk about now, they're going to know that. And then what they do is they open up, they tell you the truth, they meet with you, they listen to you.
Exactly.
And it just starts to get really easy. And you feel good, right? You enjoy it. And people invite you into to early in the process, and they ask you questions, and they say, what do you think about this? What do you think about our competitors? And all of a sudden you start having relationships that last for 20 plus years, and things get easier. And you enjoy what you do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I love the whole thing about motives being transparent.
Yeah.
It's funny, you and I are writing our books at the same time. We use a lot of the same phraseology.
Did you say that?
Yeah, because I have the thing about motives being transparent, and instead of the bubble, I said, what if you had to write your motivations on your forehead in Sharpie?
Perfect. Yeah, there you go.
Right. I mean, same thing, right? What if you had to advertise what your motives were?
Yeah.
When you're in a meeting with somebody.
Perfect.
Yeah, well, think about that. What if you had to use a thought bubble, or if you had to take Sharpie and write it on your forehead?
Exactly.
You might do different, but it's one of these things that sort of 2 points. One is we violate so completely in sales is, at the end of every month, every quarter, your account exec's been out there diligently trying to build this, connection, this relationship with this buyer. And I'm here to help. And then, get to that last week of the month, and the manager says, gosh, what can we pull into this month from next? And hey, Tom, go offer them 20% to close this week.
Right.
And suddenly it becomes very clear to them that, hey, you're just transactional. And all this work and all this thing you've been talking about, your motives, are very transparent, but they're not the ones you put up front.
Well, and I think there's a way to address that too, because I think this is one of the reasons that people, they don't really know how to balance those two ideas, right? It's like, I need to put the customer first and make them, but I also got to, and the reality is, so if you ask the question, why is it in the best interest of the customer for me to offer them a 20% discount to buy now? If you start asking that question to everybody that talks to you in the organization, your manager says, answer that question. Why is it? Because people don't want to say it's not, do it anyway.
Right.
And so, but if you,
even though that's what they're thinking,
but it's like, well, and they may, like you said, don't sell out. And if they say, well, I don't care about the customer, I care about getting this done, blah, 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 blah. And like, well, then that may tell you what you need to know. But most of the time you can come up with a reason why either not do it or do it in a way that's best for the customer. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that is a level of thought, though, that's just not given to it.
Exactly. And I think that's what it's deciding, making that decision that's what I'm all about. And then ultimately, that's going to be my approach, because I will be more successful if I take that approach. Yeah.
Well, and it's sometimes the approach is, not offer the discount.
Right.
And, have enough pipeline that you can hit this month and next month.
That's really the better point, Andy, is like, if you do the right things, you won't have to come at the end of the month to make your quarter or to make your number, because you're having to, push things or make moves because you don't have enough in the pipeline, because you don't know really how to sell, how to influence.
Yeah. Well, the perspective I try to, not getting off the beaten path here, but this perspective I give people about discounting is it's a matter of surplus. People discount when they have a surplus, right? You're selling TVs. At the end of the month, you got too many TVs in the inventory. Hey, discount them so you can sell them, right? Bring the new ones in. Well, in this case, the surplus is unmet quota.
Right. Yeah. Which is so motivational for the customer.
Right. And that's what managers do.
Right.
Right. I'm on the shelves. I've got all this unmet quota. How am I going to move it? I'm going to have a sale. I'm just like, Crazy Eddie and his retail store in New York back in the 70s. Says, let's go give that away.
That's right. Great way to position that. Exactly. Yeah. Well, and it hurts you. It keeps you from being a trusted partner, because now all of a sudden you look at somebody peddling something and offering discount rather than helping them achieve an objective and knowing what they're trying to accomplish. What's the process to do that? What's the timeline? Who needs to get involved, and being driving that? You don't need to be coming at the end of the month saying, how about now?
Yeah, yeah. Are we ready now?
Yeah, we ready
It's
now.
like,
That should have
are we
all been
there yet?
established when you first met with them and said, hey, listen, people who solve this problem, we walk them through this process because this is the process you need to walk through to solve that kind of problem. And if you
Right.
if you understand how to do that and what those steps are, you're never in that situation.
Right. So I was going to ask a question about influence because we sort of touched on that. But you talk about the traditional methods of influence don't work anymore. I was wondering, or a traditional approach to influence. So what are those things? Because I think, again, it's not something people really traditionally sort of think about as okay, what does it mean to influence? And why is it not working the way it did before?
Well, I think of the traditional approach to influence is really just equal to going to court, which is, by the way that I thought about it when I first got married.
Oh,
Right? I'm going to make a business case, right? And you can make your business case. There'll be a judge, and someone will rule, and the logical argument wins. Right? So it's like a logical, right?
Right.
Well, the problem is there's no one in the court. No one's listening. So it isn't a logical case. No one's showing up for your business case. In other words, because they're not making a logical decision. When people are, and it comes from this principle that I call the cornerstone principle, because it's a cornerstone of everything we teach, is that when someone's emotionally closed, the more you try to persuade them, the more closed they become.
yeah. Exactly.
Right? So
and research shows, like in political campaigning and so on, is the facts don't matter.
Facts don't matter. So the traditional
approach, they make it worse.
It makes it backfire. So
right.
So the traditional approach is make your business case, right? Support and validate your recommendation, which there's a place for that. That's for sure, but not when someone's emotionally closed. So that's when the traditional. And so the problem is, the percentage of customers that are open, or prospects that are open, is so small, and that's why the traditional approach is failing. Because what we're doing is we're going after the market, and we're saying, and we're just keep beating up and hitting, creating more volume, amping up the message, doing more of it. I mean, I'm getting more and more people, and people are just deleting, ignoring, and it's just backfiring. And so that's what I mean by the traditional, value prop.
Right.
Make your argument. Again, there's a place for that. And when someone's sitting there with a piece of paper and a pen or a notepad or an iPad or they're in a Zoom meeting and they're saying, tell me what to do, value prop's important, making a business case is important, and do that. But that is not what's happening the majority of the time.
Right. So this idea, you talk about converting the unreceptive, those who are emotionally closed. I think back to Jonah Berger's book, The Catalyst, again. And he gives a great example about, I think it was for an LGBTQ organization that was canvassing for some issue. I don't know if it's a specific ballot proposition or something in the South, traditionally in real red territory.
Right.
And they trained them, people going door to door, canvassing, asking people about this, in a way to say, look, the way to connect with someone is to find common ground. And there's always a way to find common ground with people, right? It's not about pitching. You're not about, confrontation. You're not about trying to change their mind. First, you just have to find that common ground, right? It could be something that was, maybe they had somebody, in their family who was gay, or, a relative, or, it doesn't even have about that issue per se, but they trained people to be just here as a human, to talk to you as a human and find that common ground. From there, then they could start having a more open conversation about the issues because people weren't closed to it, right? They didn't have their defenses up. And I found this is true in selling. For me, as someone who's more introverted than extroverted, is I wasn't very good, still not at sort of the pitch, right, the elevator pitch. No, I wanted to ask a question, find out something about this person, and maybe find some place we could start the conversation from.
Yeah, I completely agree with that approach. I talk about it in the way that I position it in the book, and I kind of back up and say it this way and provide a little more context before I talk about the common ground piece. Is that before you can influence, you have to have, and I said this earlier, you got to get an invitation. Somebody's got to invite you, right? You got to invite you in the door, right? If they're canvassing whatever, and that's true. If you're sending an email, you're walking into somebody's office, if you're account manager and you kind of want to try to meet with somebody else, or maybe you want to shift the conversation from the ABC product they buy to the XYZ product they don't buy. Right? I want to show, I got to get an invitation before I can have that really conversation. And the what you want to lead with, which is the common ground piece, is I always say you lead with what's on their whiteboard. That's the common ground.
Yep.
Right? It's like they have a whiteboard. I mean, if you think about this, it's just so changes the way you think about your introduction, regardless. They have a whiteboard in their office. And now most people really do have a whiteboard. If they don't, metaphorically, they have a whiteboard. And the whiteboard is real simple. They want something. Everybody wants something. And then they have a plan to get there. Everybody. And so if I start with what's on their whiteboard, it always captivates their attention. And it always creates that common ground. Do you want this? Do you want this? Right? I understand that way. Now, sometimes I got to guess, right? But if I'm trying to find the common ground, I'm searching. I'm looking for that whiteboard. Do you care about? Or now, and if I'm serving the same type of profile person, the same persona, the whiteboard issues are typically fall into 4 or 5 categories. And so if I guess, or I'm usually, at least I'm trying to talk about them. I'm showing them a picture of them. And if I show them a picture of them, they will always look at it. Right. And so if it's more strategic opportunity and it makes sense, you do a little due diligence and you find out what actually is on their whiteboard.
The whiteboard before that. Yes.
And then you lead with that.
Relatively easy these days too. Yes.
Yeah. And I think, I get people reach out to me all the time because, I'm quote unquote CEO. I say quote unquote because I spend more of my time doing this than I do being a CEO, but I have that title, owner, CEO, and they all say the same. They never talk about my whiteboard. They talk about them. Yep. This is what we do. And it's just now, I see it if it actually is on my whiteboard, they get lucky, but it's very rare.
Very rare. Yeah, there was a gentleman on the show a year or so ago, Dr. Stephen, I think I mispronounced his last name, Stephen Timme, Timme, from Georgia Tech, wrote a book called Insight-Led Selling. An excellent book. He did a lot of research for it. Well, I co-authored it with a woman, Melody Astley, I think her name is. And, but in there, one of his findings from his research was that, to your point precisely, is 77% of the C-suite, or let's say decision makers, find that sellers showed up only prepared to talk about their product, not the customer's problem.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I say all the time, decision makers don't meet with sales reps because they don't have any information or understanding of how to solve their problem. They're just repping a product. Now, they will meet with a sales rep who actually doesn't act like a sales rep. Right. They'll meet with somebody. In other words, if you act like a sales rep, and I define a sales rep as somebody that's saying, I got this product and I know how to sell it, versus a trusted partner or consultant, however you want to, whatever label you want to give it. If you know something about how to solve their problem that they don't know, they will talk to you.
Yes. Yeah.
Why wouldn't they?
Why wouldn't they? Yeah. But I think back to beginning my career, absolute beginning, first job selling computer systems to, roomfuls of metal to companies. And I was fresh out of school. I didn't know anything about business. I was selling, there's a full suite of accounting applications, back office applications, which, didn't really know anything about either. But talking to CEOs and founders, I was selling to the construction industry. But I was naturally curious. I wanted to learn, right? And as long as I was seemingly sincere in the questions I was asking and they logically flowed. It looked like I was learning, and they could sense I was learning, and
it was going somewhere.
Is going somewhere. They gave me their time.
Yeah. That's, the times that I've met with CEOs, even large organizations that I've met with CEOs, and they know that I've met with other companies in the industry, the first question they ask me is about what's happening in the industry.
Yep.
So because my point in saying that is they don't know what all these other companies are doing. We have the viewpoint or the knowledge of knowing what, if we're in the industry talking to sometimes hundreds of companies, that are trying to solve similar problems. And we have that intelligence. And if we're learning from everybody we meet with, we become super smart. And that is leverageable versus here are the questions I'm supposed to ask to try to sell you my product. If I ask you these 4 questions, I can pitch my product. Versus what's on your white, forget my product, forget my solution. No. What are you doing? What's important to you? How you get a raise? What's your incentive? Right. What does the end of the year look like? What's success look like? And again, they have to feel like it is related to the meeting, right? That's the trick. You have to put a because in there. Here, I'm going to ask you this question because I think I want to know, or here's how it'll help you. I call it priming the question. But if you can do that, people will talk to you, especially like you said, if you're sincere. It's what happens, what most of us do, and this is back to the motive thing. What most of us do is we ask our question, and then our face looks like we could care less about the answer.
Well, yeah. Well, I love the line you have in your book about it. You said customer's willingness to listen is more important than your ability to communicate.
That's exactly
right. I mean, truer words never spoken, right? Is so that changes the perspective on, okay, well, what are you trying to accomplish when you're meeting with someone? Are you trying to, hey, we're going to train you how to give a presentation, but we ever train sellers how to get the customer to listen, to open up?
Yeah, open up and listen. Yeah, it's really just simple 2 dimensions. The first dimension is what do we say, right? Which we spend a lot of time on, our playbooks and what do we do and our moves and our strategy, and that's all. But the other side of the equation, the other dimension, which I think is far more important than our playbooks and our strategy and our presentation, our value prop, is the customer, like you said, willingness to listen. And there's specific skills that we can learn and specific mindset and things that we can do that actually make that really easy. Now, it's very counterintuitive, and I love what you talk about is, you believe it's in part of our DNA to kind of be this person. And I agree with that. I think deep down, we are created to serve our customers. We're more fulfilled to serve our customers. We're created to have integrity and do the right thing. But it is very counterintuitive. The stream flows, if you kind of go downstream, it flows to self.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't feel good at the end of the day, but if I just wake up and go with the natural gravity, I'm going to go downhill. And so I have to fight that. And so that's one of the passions of mine and why I wrote the book is just to encourage people. It will work. Be who you know you need to be. But at the same time, and here's the other thing I think is important, because a lot of times people will misunderstand the message. That doesn't mean you don't work. You don't, like we talk about drop the rope. A lot of people throw the rope and leave. No, you drop the rope, you eliminate tension from the conversation, but you stay, and you need to have the expertise to lead. You need to challenge, as the challenger sale talks about. You do need to challenge the customer, but why do you challenge the customer? Because you're trying to help them make the right decision, not because you need to win the deal. And if you challenge the customer without having a receptive audience, it really backfires.
Yes. Oh, yeah. You just come across as arrogant.
Yeah, exactly.
And we seem to have gone so far down a road where you would think, these things, especially given the experiences, we look at the data in the last 10 years about quota attainment and all these things. It's like, hey, people, what we're doing just isn't working.
No.
Right? It's one of the reasons I wrote this last book. It was just like, we're just not getting better. And why is that? Given all the advantages of all the technologies we have to play, why aren't we so much better at this thing we've been doing in this form for 140 years now? this sort of industrial B2B sales. Why aren't we better at it? And it's because it's like we're just recreating the wheel every time somebody new comes into the profession.
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately and discussing internally with our leadership team and we see that I think we believe that there's really finally going to be a revolution in sales. I think and a lot of it has to do with the Great Resignation. Okay. I think the sellers are revolting against this idea of we're not going to call at the end of the month and say, I'm going to give you a discount. And so I think they don't want
to be salesy.
They don't want to be sales anymore. And it's so hard now to get a customer that we've got to be better at managing and growing the existing customers that we have. And that's a different approach. And I do think reps that are still holding on to the old technique, they're bouncing around and saying, I'm looking for the next deal where I can hold a bucket out of the window and just catch money, because I got the latest and greatest thing. I think those people are searching, and I think they're looking for that. And I think there'll be some of those opportunities. If I just send an email, people go, yeah, I want that. But I think those are getting fewer and far between. So I think a lot of things are coming together where people are going to get serious about, okay, we got to do this differently. Yeah, we got to send different emails. We got to talk differently. We've got to communicate things like, I'm not sure this is right for you. Let's have a discussion and determine if I don't know if we can do it. Telling the truth, saying things like, no, we don't do that. Right. But we do this. Let's have a conversation.
Right. Yeah. To your point about like emails and so on, there's some big company, I want to say it was one of the big, consulting firms,
right,
has decreed no more email sequences.
I got to track that down.
Yeah, I've been trying to. I got to remember who told it to me, but that's pretty significant, right? As a change.
It's very, and I think people are. I'm seeing it in the messaging. It's like your podcast. Like the opening of your podcast, it's by Revenue.io. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
It's a commercial. And the way that was done is so like conversational and real and authentic. And it's like you seeing people shift to be an organization shifting their message. And it's funny, along those lines, we were just talking about this yesterday. So we, as every organization does, we get raised hand leads. People say, I want to talk to somebody, right? So we've got a sequence involved right now where, the email goes out from me and then I'm the head of marketing. And it got mixed up in how the sequence happened. So it was like the sales professional was following up and the sequence was happening. They ignored the salesperson and reached out to the marketing person. It's like even though they're like, here's the person following up saying, hey, I understand just the typical, you want to talk to us and I'm here and I'm the person that you talk to. And they're like, I'm not sure about you, but I'm going to talk to Jenna, the marketing person, who her email sounded more, less. It's just, customers do not want to talk to a sales rep. As I talked to somebody the other day, they hate sales reps. Now, I think that's a little strong. That was his opinion.
Well, let's talk about that a second, because Gartner came out with their research in summer 2020. Hey, sky's falling. Right. Buyers no longer want to talk to sellers. And my thought, the response to that was, well, buyers never want to talk to sellers.
Right.
But I think the self-aware organization knows they need to. If they can, because they need somebody to ask them the questions they don't know to ask themselves. They need somebody to challenge, right? Because it can help them make a better decision. But if you can't come in and be any better, if you're not any better than your website, right? Yeah, they have no need for it.
Yeah, I think what's happening is there's a percentage of people obviously that need to talk to sellers, and it's just that the belief now is I can get so much information without talking to a seller, right? So that if I can, I'll do everything I can to try to figure it out on my own rather than deal with talking to multiple different people and then how sticky that gets after the meeting and how they barrage whatever that whole thing is that happens, that I'll do everything I can to avoid that dance, either by talking to people I know or doing my own research to then finally reach out to the few people that I trust or have been recommended to me. And so there's something happening there where, just the percentage of people that are willing to engage early is dramatically dropping. But I do think, I think we can still, I don't think the profession's going away, and I think we can be successful. No. To your point, I just think we need to, I don't want to sound like I'm preaching doom and gloom. I think it's a great opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity to be different and say, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. If you need me, I do these things. We do them really well. If you don't need me, I don't do these things. And let me help you make a decision and change your messaging, get real, do videos that people can see who you are, be honest about what you want, know what you're talking about, be passionate, and drop the rope. Don't try to manipulate people and control them, because control is just an illusion.
Right.
And people will respond. And that is a competitive advantage that you will have that will separate you from the 98 other people that are sending the same emails and the same LinkedIn request and the same message over and over again because they're lazy.
Right. Yeah. No, So two things to that. One is...
So I got my soapbox there, Andy. Yeah, I got fired up.
I'm glad. Well, I think one change that has to be made, and I've been preaching this on the show here, is as a salesperson, think about not what you need to be in order to sell, but think about what the buyer needs you to be in order to make the decision.
Love that.
Right?
Love that.
And I challenge sales leaders when I talk to them, and they're putting together hiring specifications for a product's job specification for a sales job. And I'll say, oh, interesting. So have you ever asked your buyers what they need from you? Right? Because I think sales is basically we're hired by the buyer. Right. It's a job to be done, right? They're hired by the buyer to help them make a decision. So if they were hiring you, if they actually were hiring you, what do you need to be in order to help them?
I love it. And you know what it starts with? And this is something that blows my mind. I've been in this business, sales training, sales consulting, for 27 years, almost 20 years. I can think of one time where I looked at a sales process that was built around helping a buyer make a decision.
Yes.
I mean, just think about that fundamental idea.
Yeah.
Right? We got a process for how we develop an opportunity, develop a customer, however, whatever you want to call it. We have a process, and it's centered around the rep, not centered around the customer.
Absolutely.
It really should be really simple. It should be, so if a customer's at this stage, what are the next stage? What are the next steps that they need to follow for them to evaluate solution or solve this problem? Yeah. And we just need to orient how we think about our role, how we think about our process to how do we serve the customer. And it sounds, as my customer said the other day, woo-woo, but it's the truth. And by the way, when the deal stalls and there's no velocity, because we don't know what to do. Because if we lay out the process and say, hey, listen, for companies that we work with, this is how the best way for them to evaluate their solution. We've been doing this for 20 something years. We've been doing this for 10 years. We've worked with 100. Here's what we do. And here's where are you? We know you're here. So I would recommend these stages. Now they may say, well, we can't do that. Okay, well, let's talk about it. Mm-hmm. I'm just telling you what's the best way to evaluate a solution. Right. Based on our best, not by our solution, but by solve this problem.
Yeah.
No, doctors don't go, what do you want to do next?
Well, plastic surgeons maybe, but yeah. So
that's a good point. That's what my plastic surgeon said.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
But no, you're yeah. Yeah, I've been, well, a couple of points. Again, one is yesterday I was having a conversation with recording an interview for the show with Brent Adamson, Challenger Sale.
Yeah.
And
he's getting around. He was on another podcast. He was on the podcast following a podcast I was on a couple of days.
Maybe liberated to some degree, so he's no longer at Gartner. But
okay, got it.
But because the thing where he couldn't necessarily go on shows of clients and so on just because
Right.
conflict. So anyway,
Makes sense.
yeah. So I asked him, I said, okay, you've got this classic buyer enablement diagram that Gartner put out in 2018 with their buyer enablement study, what they call their spaghetti bowl diagram with this, this is what the buying journey looks like. And it's just, looks like a bowl of spaghetti.
Right.
And I asked Brett, I said, so, I have to admit, I said, I haven't, since that time, really haven't come across, me personally, I haven't come across, I think, more than one organization in all that time who said, oh yeah, they looked at that diagram and said, oh, that's the way buying happens. We need to change how we're approaching the buyer, right? And we're going to market with the buyer to reflect what they're trying to do. And so I asked him, I said, have you seen any? And he said, well, yeah. But then I was like, yeah, but not too many.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it is becoming popular. I think people are having an awareness that needs to change.
Yeah. Well, I think that I sort of look at it as like, we'll know we're sort of heading in the right direction when sellers describe the stage they're at from the buyer's terminology, using the buyer's terminology. Not we're in discovery mode, we're in qualification mode, we're in blah, 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 blah. But no, when you're doing a deal review with somebody, with a manager, it's like, yeah, I'm at whatever the term would be for a buyer. We're in this stage.
Yeah, we're in this stage. And the good news is it's really not complicated because to do both, because there's a reason why we have a seller-centric process, because it's intuitive to the seller.
Sure.
That's good, right? When you're training sellers, you don't want to say, don't do everything counterintuitive. That's tough. But if you have both tracks, right? If you say, here's the customer's process and here's your process and here's, you can line those up so that they work together, or at least have the customer's objective at every stage of the process. If it's just seller-generated process, because some of these companies we work with are huge. They can't just change their process. I mean, it's embedded everywhere. But But if you at least add a row and say at each one of these stages that we go through, here's the customer's objective, and here's what then at least it orients you around what this is all about, which also tells you how to advance.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me ask you another question. This sort of sprung not on my planned list of questions, but one of the changes I think needs to be made is, and I wonder if you see this in your consulting practice companies you work with, is I saw this figure from research in another book I read just within the last 6 months or so. Surveyed 14,000 plus enterprises around the world.
Okay.
And that the average win rate on deals 100K or higher was 17%.
100K or higher?
Yeah.
Okay.
So something with modicum of complexity, but not transactional, right? Let's say. And I'm thinking, wow, that really sucks.
Wow, that really sucks.
And but I see this with SaaS companies, and that we can't use necessarily as a guide because some of them their motivations are just toward an exit, not building an enterprise. But really low win rates.
Right.
And it's like, to me, this is becoming sort of an epidemic. It's that people satisfied with really subpar performance. And it's like, for me, it's like, okay, if you've got a 20% win rate, one of two things, or both perhaps, are play is, one is, do you really have product market fit? Arguably, no. Or B,
right.
you're just really bad at selling. And we're helping the buyer make a decision, or both. But it seems to be increasingly common. I'm talking to friends such as yourself, other people that have businesses similar to yours, working with sometimes Fortune 1000 type companies and some smaller, and it seems to be fairly consistent. And this seems to be is something that's sort of been a trend along with quota attainment.
It's declining.
It's declining, and it's like, okay, well, we've gotten so part of my analysis is, we've gotten so in love with top of funnel, and the tools exist to help us sort of, spread the nets out and bring in a lot of fish, whether they're all the ones we want or not. And then if we're just okay, we can close 1 out of every 5 of our qualified opportunities.
Yeah. And we build our process and planning around that.
And to me, that's just not sustainable. But also we're just not selling. I mean, granted, there are variances by industry type and product type and so on. But
changes in market.
But still, that number is so low. And I just don't see people sales leaders being that concerned about changing it. That's the part that I'm concerned about. It's like I have conversations with CROs of publicly traded companies. And it's like, you're 19%. So, what's your growth strategy for next year? Oh, it's all about top of funnel, right? Increase deal flow, lead flow, and
I get more in. I get that 19% equals this number.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, but what about increasing your win rate? Let's say 1% next year. I get this blank. I get this blank stare. And I ask him. I said, so do you know what the impact is revenue-wise, short-term and long-term, of each 1% increase in your win rate? No idea.
Interesting. They're not even thinking about it.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because the organization's so big and that's such a heavy lift or such a big change to talk about how to improve performance, rather than it's just easier to, here's the dials I can control, and these dials I can control, I can easily turn, and ultimately I know at the end of the thing there's a 19%, and there you go.
Well, I think that's part of it. I don't think it's related to enterprise size, though. I think that even spent a lot of time with startups, even the startup world, that's sort of the same mode. They're saying that, a friend sent me this diagram, and I appropriate it and use it in presentations as well. And he sent it to me. He said he had 2 big circles on a page, and let's say one was the size of a basketball and one was the size of a golf ball. And he said, the one basketball, that is the amount of mental energy and time and attention in the sales industry we devote to top of funnel. And he said the golf ball, he said that's the amount of mental energy, time and attention we devote to selling. Because he's like me. He thought top of funnel is not really selling, it's marketing, right?
Right.
And I think we're still in that mode. And I think this is one of the changes that needs to happen is I jokingly tell people, I said, you'll know we're on the right track when the most popular sales conference in a year is no longer, inbound or outbound or something. It's discovery and qualification.
Yeah. I think some of the challenge with focusing on the golf ball is because there's a belief that you just hire sellers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You just hire, you hire talent, you don't develop it. And that is just not true.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not a strategy you can win with. I think people can win. They can win with that strategy. But people, we train thousands of people every year, and we walk into organizations. I met with a rep the other day who doubles the performance of the second rep in the organization. Mm-hmm. So he outperforms the second, number 2 rep, since twice as much revenue, and his closing rate is way over that. Right. I mean, we see some reps with closing rates in the 90s.
Yeah,
it's like because they know how to do the things that we're talking about. And so if you invest in it, it's the same thing, and I'm hoping that the evolution or the revolution, whatever you want to call it, what's coming in the market, people are going to get more passionate about developing their people because it drives engagement. Definitely. It's not just about selling; it drives engagement, it drives customer retention. All these things touch so many different things, but it's like we're still running organizations like the military. It's like this doesn't work that way. People leave. They don't. They bounce around. But it's like coaching.
Yeah.
Everybody talks about coaching. Everybody understands the data around talking and meeting with your reps and riding along and giving them feedback and everybody. Most organizations. When I ask the reps, when's the last time your manager rode with you? 19 months ago.
Yeah.
I mean, they call it coaching,
Right.
but it's a conversation, right? It's like, hey, you should do this. This is the, hey, watch me do this. You should do it like this. Hey, I'll do it this time. See you later. Blah, 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 blah. I mean, people don't. And as soon as we train them, a lot of times we'll train them. And then, we've got a coaching certification process. We're taking the coaches through. We're teaching them how to coach, apply all this. And then all of a sudden, the senior leaders will throw out something else. And the next thing you do, they're doing data analysis. And then that totally sidetracks the initiative. Now, we have a process that hopefully will keep that from happening. But these are the frustrations of sales enablement and learning. But the bottom line is it does work.
Yeah.
And I think we're now seeing the consequences of a top of funnel approach.
Right. Well, and I think as well is this idea that the human's not quite as important in this, right? Because it is the overarching dream of many technologists and so on is to take sellers out of the equation and
AI.
Yeah, and the whole separate conversation on that. But there are quote unquote thought leaders out there. One I saw 2 weeks ago on LinkedIn said, buyers don't want a human connection. They've got friends. And I'm like, first of all, dude, you've been on my show. We argue about this. You're wrong then. You're still wrong. It's like, yet, there's somebody's consuming that content. And it's like, come on, it's just dead wrong.
Yeah. Well, and I think the misconception about some of that idea about relationships and connections and all that stuff is about, they think it's, the goal is a friend. The goal, relationship determines influence.
Yeah.
And the reality is customers need to be influenced. They need help. Right. Whether I'm working on something in my house or I'm trying to solve, like right now I have problems in my business. Do I have the solution to my problem? No. I'm talking to companies and I don't know exactly what to do. I can't play the GC of some of the things that I'm working on. It's not that I need to hire people, get things done. I need help. I have cloud-based applications that I don't exactly know how to fix or how to improve, and I need somebody to help me. And I'm going to do everything I can to avoid talking to salespeople, but I really want to talk to a partner who will help me. And if the relationship opens the door for me to listen to them, and if I feel like they're trying to manipulate me, don't care about me, my emotions will tell me not to trust them, and my emotions drive decision making. That's the thing that I think people miss. Emotions drive decision making, and if people disagree with that, I'm like, you just follow them around for a week. I'll ask them what car they drive.
Well, exactly.
There's one car that is the most efficient, effective, economic car, and I guarantee you they don't drive it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Tom. Unfortunately, we've run out of time.
No, we can't. Andy. We've got to keep going.
Let's do it again. This was fun.
I'm lonely. Yeah. I need friends.
So, tell people how to connect with you.
Well, the obvious way is on LinkedIn. Love for people to connect with me on LinkedIn because I obviously post consistently. But if they're interested in the book, they're not ready to buy, but they want to learn more, there's a book website called unreceptivebook.com. And there's some videos of me talking about the book. You can download an excerpt from the book. So that would be a great way to check out the book if you want to learn more about Aslan and our sales training that we provide. That's aslantraining.com. And Aslan is ASLAN.
Perfect. All right, Tom.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Loved being on your show. Loved meeting you. You did not disappoint.
Thank you. Well, we'll do it again.
Thank you, my friend.
Okay, friends, that's it for this episode. First of all, I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I'm so grateful for your support of the show. And I really want to thank our guest, Tom Stanfill, for sharing his insights with us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, Sales Enablement with Andy Paul, on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you so much for investing your time with me today. Until next time, I'm your host, Andy Paul. Good selling, everyone.